Okay, so today we're going to go over how to run a repeated measures t-test. Remember, with the repeated measures t-test, we have one group of individuals who have provided two different measures. So in the case of our town of Wise data, we might be looking at things like how important do people rate safety versus convenience in choosing where they currently live. And so those are the kinds of questions that you might be asking. We've got the same group of individuals, our same sample, who reported on both of those pieces of information, and we're going to compare how relatively important they rated them. So remember, we've got our data up in SPSS, our variable view, we can see the actual responses that people gave. Sorry, our data view, we can see the actual responses that people gave. Our variable view, we can see all our variables listed. We've got the coding under the values as well. In order to do these, do a repeated measures analysis, we're going to go to analyze. SPSS actually calls it a, let me just show you. So you go to analyze and you go to compare means. SPSS calls it a paired samples t-test. It's the same thing as a repeated measures, but we've got the same individuals reporting on two different outcomes. So we're going to do a paired samples t-test. You can see it's set up a little bit differently, but what we've got is a list of the two variables that are paired. We're only going to do one pair at a time. So let's say I want to look at how important people rate, let's do civic clubs versus senior citizen activities, okay? And so maybe those are my two variables, civic clubs and senior citizen activities. So I'm gonna move civic clubs over, and I'm gonna move senior citizen activities over. Now it automatically puts in a spot for a second pairing. For now, we're not gonna worry about that. We just wanna compare the relative importance of these two things. Okay, so again, you've got our two variables. If you mess up, you can move them back over. You can click and drag just like you did before. If you want to do a different pairing, you can double click on them both and move them back over. Let's see, we got our seniors. Let's do civic clubs. Okay, so now we've got them back in here. We're going to say okay. And just like before, it's going to pop up an output box. It's going to give us the means for each of our items. So remember, we've got the same, in this case, we've got 186 individuals who've reported on both the importance of senior citizen activities and civic clubs in their choice of current housing. Remember to go back to the survey to identify the questions or the specific phrasing of the questions. We've got the standard deviation for each one of these items. We also have the standard error for each one of these items. It gives us the correlation, which we'll talk about next week, but it does provide that automatically. But really what we're interested in is this paired samples t-test. Okay, remember that a paired samples or repeated measures t-test is all about the difference, right? So we're comparing each individual's scores on senior citizen activities versus civic clubs, and we're comparing the difference between this two. So this tells us that there's a mean difference of -0.6. That's not zero. And so if there was a mean difference of 0, that's going to be our null hypothesis, and that people rate these two as equally important. So the fact that there is a mean difference that's slightly bigger than 0 tells us that there could be something going on. The standard deviation is the standard deviation for the difference. We've also got the standard error of the mean provided here. We have the confidence interval for the difference score as well. It also gives us our t-value, which is -6.98. I already know just by looking at it that that's a pretty big t-value. And we've got our degrees of freedom of 185 and -1. And so again, SPSS gives us the p-value for one-tailed versus two-tailed, or one-sided or two-sided. SPSS generally will give you the specific p-value unless it's really, really small. And so what this is telling you is we're gonna make it two-sided. We don't know whether people think senior citizen activities or civic clubs are more important. We've just made a generic two-tailed test. But what we see is our p-value is less than 0.001, which means it's really small, which means that we do have a significant finding. There is a significant difference between how people rate senior citizen activities versus civic clubs. And we can look at these means and we know that those civic clubs are rated as more important than senior citizen activities. SPSS also gives us effect sizes, and we've talked about Cohen's d. Remember, we don't really look at the standardizer, but we can look at the point estimate, which is our estimate of Cohen's d is 0.512. So there's about a half a standard deviation of difference between those two. And we also have the confidence interval around the Cohen's d, but really what we need is this point estimate right here. So we have a significant difference. There's a significant difference in how much people rate the importance of senior citizen activities versus civic clubs in their current housing, with civic clubs being more important. One thing we've talked about so far, but I haven't added in the video, is talking about how to graph differences. So I wanted to just quickly include that. Excel, I think, is the easiest way to do a graph. You could do this in SPSS too, but or in numbers as well. But what we've got is our means, and really that's probably what we want to be graphing. That's where we're going to see the difference. So we have, we're going to set it up. We have civic clubs and senior citizen activities. And our mean for civic clubs is 2.79. And our mean for senior citizens is 2.18. Remember that this is on a scale of 1 to 5, so we might want to think about that as we're graphing them as well. So we're just going to highlight our data and go to Insert and Charts. And probably what we want to do is just a bar graph is the easiest way to depict this, because we're showing the mean for two different things. Most of what we do will be a bar graph. You can play around with how you want it set up, but we're comparing the differences between two groups, or sorry, between two averages. Now, a couple of things you can change if you want to add a chart title, or probably we want to add a label for what this axis is. So we can, if we select these quick layout things, it gives us some options. In terms of where things are. You don't need the series label because in this case we only have it's the same groups, so we don't have two different colored bars, but we could add that and just delete the series label. Axis title might be something like importance in current housing, so having your axis titled is important. Difference in importance in current housing, something like this. You could have a label here. We really don't need to because we've got these. Something else that we might think about changing is this. So this scale is created automatically. It goes from 0 to 3. But if we go back to our data and look at the answer options or go back to the questionnaire, people are rating this on a scale of 1 to 5. So 0 isn't even an option. So having 0 in our graph is probably not a great idea. So if you double click on these, you can actually change the axis options. And so we can change our minimum to 1 and we can change our maximum to 3. You can adjust the units of the bar, sorry, your maximum to 5. If you want to, let's make our major unit 1 and we don't need minor units. Okay, so now it's looking a little more accurate in terms of what we've got. So this is generally depicting, you can see that there is a difference. When you start working on Canva, sometimes we actually put in like an asterisk or something like that to indicate that these two are actually different. So you're welcome to play around with these different types of figures and kind of see what works for you. Another thing you might do, and I'm just going to make up data, but if you're looking at something like students versus employees, you might want to think about doing like a pie graph just to kind of describe how many people you have in each group. And so let's say I think we've got something like 50 students and 120 employees. Okay, so we can also do a similar thing. Go to insert and let's see what happens if we insert a pie chart. All right, so now we've got a nice chart here. We can add our participants. We've got that. Again, if we do the quick layout, we can add the percentages in here. So now we know that 29% are students and 71% are employees. This is really nice to include in your infographic. It's a nice visual depiction of your data. This bar chart is the format for repeated measures. You could also do this with your independent groups though, right? You've got your independent groups and you're comparing the differences between groups. And so in this case, the labels would be your groups and your y-axis would be ratings on whatever variable you were comparing them. So this is just kind of a quick, here's how you make a graph, but you do need to include at least 2 graphs in your infographic, and the more the better. The more you can kind of visually depict this information, the better. And that's it for this. And this is just a starting point. So you can go ahead and run your repeated measures. And again, just a reminder for the repeated measures, it's called something different, but in SPSS, it's paired samples, same analyses. Okay.